Triage is a simple framework that you plug in just before your sales process to ensure that you're not wasting time talking to tire kickers, brain pickers, fucking coffee buyers, and all of that other malarkey. It's by far and away the most powerful concept that we actually teach to our clients inside our programs. But if you've got no leads, then this isn't for you. But if you do have leads, you do have prospects, and you find yourself or your sales team wasting time talking to unqualified prospects or taking sales call with people that are never going to buy, then implementing a proper triage system before the sales negotiation can be the most impactful thing you do, as it allows you to take back that time that you're giving to these time wasters and actually focus it on the leads that are actually going to convert and pay you money. We've boiled this concept down into 3 very simple questions that all prospects must answer before you take them seriously. And what this allows you to do is to spend your precious resources, whether that's time, advertising dollars, whatever it may be, only on the prospects that are going to convert. And these 3 questions, it's easy. You can either ask it by email, by social media chat and messaging services, text, or if you're skilled enough, you can do it on the phone. Now, before we get right into it, if you don't know who I am, I'm Connor Benham. I'm co-owner of the Wealth-Ed business, and we've been responsible for helping our clients generate several millions in sales through spending far fewer on advertising that actually works. As you can see in that picture, just down here in the bottom left, that's myself on the right, my business partner, the evil ball genius on the left, and our lovely little assistant in the middle, that's Holly. That's not the whole team there, but that's the core group. And that's our upcoming book. There's probably a link for it down below in the description. It's M82, the ultimate kick-ass take no prisoners guide to reliably, predictably, and relentlessly attracting the best clients and closing them at premium rates, fees, or prices. Triage is one of the number 1 concepts from this book, which is actually why I'm making this video today. You're a business owner. Your job is to sell shit. Whether you like it or not, your primary job is being a salesperson. And we're firm believers that if business success is measured as 199 of that 100 is making the sale. And Triage is something that allows you to close at rates of 70% or higher. Before we had Triage, we closed at rates of around 25%. Since implementing it, we've found ourselves converting at 70%, and our clients find themselves talking with far higher quality clients. They bloody love it, they do. But I started my first company when I was 18, and I was 19 when this photo was taken. I just started a Facebook advertising company, and I was giving a talk here to a room full of very successful recruiters. And I was getting my name out there and I was doing all of the right things, yet I still found myself not making as many sales as I'd like. It was very frustrating, and worse, I actually found myself constantly on the phone, essentially helping people for free because I didn't know what else to do. People were like, yeah, can we have a chat? And I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. And because I had no framework for qualifying these people, I'd naturally end up in a consultation and helping them for free, essentially taking away all of their pain and therefore all of their reasons to buy from us. That was up until obviously we discovered the concept of triage. We stole triage from the battlefield. Primarily it was a way of giving medical care to only those who needed it in very stressful situations on the battlefield. If you can imagine, you're a medic and you've got all of these wounded people in front of you, and you've got a little bag full of, medication, full of bandages, band-aids and whatnot. They found themselves not knowing who to go to first until they implemented triage. And they made it a system which took out the emotion, it took out the personal decision-making, and it just made it 3 checkboxes. Because in a battlefield with scarce resources, you only want to give it to the soldiers that are actually going to live, because they're going to get better and to help you continue fight that war. And it's the same in business. You've only got a limited amount of staff, limited amount of time, and a limited amount of money. So triage is there to protect your resources. And we've adapted it into 3 questions all prospects must answer before you take them seriously and enter a negotiation or sales event with them. Triage is by far and away the most profound process any established business owner can learn. If you're a new business owner and you haven't learned how to generate leads, well, obviously that's the primary thing for you. But if you already know how to get leads, you're already good at outbound, you're already getting the inbound leads, and now you're finding yourself wasting time with people that quite frankly don't deserve it, then Triage is going to change a lot for you. And Triage works best for business owners that have the propensity to charge several thousands, if not millions, for your thing. It's not going to work too well for you. You're selling paper clips, but if you're selling programs, photography, all the way up to private jets, Triage will work incredibly well for you. And in fact, the more expensive your thing, the more impactful Triage is. Construction companies, for example, that charge several millions for large renovations, working with main contractors who have budgets of tens of millions, find this process particularly interesting. And it is the ultimate inoculation against time wasters, tire kickers, and brain pickers. So in this video, we're going to be covering the 3 triage questions that all prospects and leads must go through before we enter a sales negotiation with them. Underneath each of those 3, there's 3 more hidden triage questions that all prospects must answer. And then we're going to just touch upon how to get the answers without overstepping boundaries, looking like a used car salesman or looking amateur, because it isn't as blunt as just asking these 3 questions outright. There's a bit of a song and dance that goes with it. Now, as I said, I co-own the Well-Fed Business Owner with the Evil Ball Genius, John McCulloch. If you want to work with us privately, there'll be an email address for you to email below. If not, then we'll crack on. So the origin of triage. The 3 triage buckets that we're stolen from is those who live without medical attention, those who die even with medical attention, and those who live only if they receive medical attention. Obviously, the medics would only focus on that last bucket. If they're going to live without medical attention, they're not going to waste their time on them. They used to say if they're kicking and screaming, it's a good thing because they're probably going to live. And then those that die even with medical attention, beyond giving them, a shot of morphine so they slip off quietly, there's not much more than they can do. And even then, morphine was very, very precious and rare, so they probably wouldn't even waste it on those that are unfortunately dying in pain. Which means they can give all of their time and attention to where they're going to get the best bang for their buck, the best bang for their resources, and that's those who live only if they receive medical attention. The fewer decisions you have to make in a high-pressure situation, the better. In high-pressure situations, the amount of stress you're feeling, you literally cannot make effective decisions. There's those that will tell you they're better under stress, and that is true for the most part. That's something I'd describe myself as. However, if you have these processes that you've laid and created and made clear boundaries around, when you're feeling calm and collected, you're going to have a far better time when it gets difficult. As old Roman warriors used to say, train hard, fight easy, and that's how you win your wars. Now, the same is true for your business. You've got scarce resources. So the impact of implementing triage is you get to save that time that you're currently wasting on degenerate lead and prospects. Correctly implementing triage rids yourself from working for free or low paying clients. So the 3 triage questions are quite simple. Can we help them? Do they have a problem we can solve? Look, not every problem is solvable. You're not Superman. You cannot fix everything. And I understand there's this mentality in the business world of, say yes and figure it out later. But quite frankly, some people's problems are far too large for us to comprehend and to take on. We have to establish that early. Do we want to help them? Are they a twat? Do they have an ethical business? So quite frankly, you do not have to help anyone that you don't want to help. If you're a vegan and you don't want to work with the meat eaters, you don't have to. It's your business, your rules. And sometimes we just don't want to help clients because they can be a bit of a dickhead. It's that simple. For example, we won't work with tobacco companies. We don't think they contribute greater good, so therefore we don't want to help them make more money. We don't want to help them make more sales. Then lastly, and you could argue the most important of them all, is can and will they pay for our help? Are they broke? Are they looking for freebies? Because quite frankly, The people that love to talk the most and spend the most time inside the sales process are those with no intention to spend any money whatsoever. They're there to try and get as many free questions as they can out of you, to essentially get free consultations. And that's why we've got a strict rule inside Triage. When a prospect first comes to us, we're the ones asking the questions, and we have a rule that we will never answer their questions. The only things we're allowed to say to prospects end with a question mark. That allows us to keep in control of the dialogue and for us to qualify them, because we are the prize, not them. Now, this does take a lot of work around your relationship with money. You have to be willing to let go of the sale. Otherwise, this won't work for you. It is a bit of a power struggle, but it correctly positions yourself early on in the sales cycle, which then allows you to command the big fees on the back end. Now, those three questions, getting the answer to these is the singular function of Triage. This isn't a framework to sell your widgets, albeit it does increase back-end conversions for a number of reasons that we can't get into today. But it answers a lot of the objections that you're going to face on sales calls, and it means you're doing it upfront and early, meaning the sales call only happens if they're qualified and there's pretty much no objections, and it just allows it to happen so smoothly. Now, this is where some people trip up on Triage. If the answer to any of these questions is a no, you have to stop dead. And when I say no, if it's not an unequivocal, clear, black and white yes, an emphatic yes, then it's a no. And if there's a faintness of no in any of these questions in the answers, you do have to stop the process dead. Otherwise, you risk wasting time on someone that doesn't deserve it. Now, if you've got barely any leads, barely any prospects, you're probably thinking, what is he on about? You have the fortunate situation where you have plenty of time to give to everyone. Doesn't mean you should give everyone the same amount of time. Not all leads and prospects are born equal. But if you've got a bucket load of leads and you're doing a bucket load of prospecting, Triage is definitely important to stop yourself and your sales team wasting time on shit boxes. We answer these questions over messaging mediums, so social media, messenger, text, email, whatever. And if you're particularly skilled, you can do it on the phone. We recommend everyone starts doing this over messaging because it allows you to have a little bit of distance between, allows you to have a little bit of breathing room in the conversation. It allows you to ponder the question that you're going to ask next. And it allows you to not break the number one rule of answering any questions that they have. If you do it on the phone, you do have to make sure you're skilled. You can't be arrogant with it. And it shouldn't take any more than 20 minutes. You can argue this does weaken your positioning, but if you do it correctly, it doesn't. So let's break down these three Triage questions. Can we help them? So the three hidden questions here are, does their problem actually have a solution? Can you solve it within the required timescales and with available resources? And do you have the skills to solve it? So number one, does their problem actually have a solution? If their problem doesn't have a solution, the best thing you can do for them and the highest level of service, and sales is service, is by telling them exactly that. Your problem does not have a solution. Telling someone that is valuable. It means they can stop the hunt and focus their time and attention elsewhere. If you think I'm wrong, we've got a long-term client who's actually a cancer doctor. I don't know the medical term, but he's a doctor that specializes with cancerous people with tumors inside their body. And these cancer patients actually thank their doctors for diagnosing them with terminal illness, with a terminal diagnosis. And he tells me it's incredibly strange, but incredibly profound. Because when he tells them, he's obviously feeling terrible about telling them, right, you've got 3 months left to live. But that is often met with a thank you, because it means they can make their peace and spend those last 3 months exactly how they want it. And they learn to live with the problem for as long as they can, or for the short time they have left. You aren't Superman, so please don't think you have the ability to solve any and every solution. Then the second hidden question, can you solve it within the required timescales and with your available resources? Sometimes prospects have stupidly demanding timescales. They'll ask you to build a website in a day. They'll ask you to hire out a sales team for them in a month. They'll ask you to build a bridge for them in a weekend, that sort of thing. You don't want to be dealing with those dreamers. They're often fucking away with the fairies, head in the cloud sort of people. So if they're making ridiculous timescale demands at the beginning, it's got to be a hard no. And sometimes you've already booked out your resources, you've already booked out your delivery team. Or if you are the person that's doing the sales and the delivery, sometimes you've booked yourself out. It's quite that simple. And then lastly, do you have the skills to solve it? Look, you shouldn't be taking on any work that you can't figure out. That's highly, highly against it. Short term, it does make you money, but long term, it fucks your reputation to the point where it doesn't make it worth it. If anything, you should be up front and say, I'm not sure, I understand the problem, I understand the solution, I'm not sure if I have the skills to do the solution. And oftentimes prospects will appreciate that candidacy and will say yes regardless. But it's better to be honest and upfront. So that's question 1 of triage. Can we help them? Does their problem have a solution? Can you solve it within the required timescales? And do you have the skills to solve it? Pretty much every sales process ever starts with the problem. People are looking for a birthday gift. They need something for their business. They need something for their home. There's usually an underlying reason for that, which is commonly a problem. Prospects are more than happy to share their problems with you. So if you ask them a question like, can you tell me a little bit about what's going on then? They'll say, hey, I need this thing for my birthday. Oh, I need a bigger home because we've got another child on the way. Oh my God, our sales team are fucking up. Something along those lines. This one comes out quite naturally in conversation, and it's usually the thing that kicks off the conversation, especially if they're an inbound lead. Question number 2 is, do we want to help them? And the 3 questions here are, is the prospect ethical? Will you enjoy doing the work with this prospect? And does the work conflict with your rules, values, boundaries, or your long-term vision? So hidden question number 1, is the prospect ethical? This may seem silly, but it's your business, it's your rules. I know many people are out there that say you've got to help everyone and everyone, but I really don't think you do. You've got the full right to choose your clients, so exercise it. And one good client does not make up for having, say, 5 bad clients. If you think of having a nice pair of really comfortable, expensive hiking shoes, and you're planning on going this long walk and you put them on, they're beautiful, there's no break in time, they're nice and cushioning, and you feel fantastic. All it takes is one tiny, tiny little rock, and those shoes become the most uncomfortable thing ever. You get that tiny little rock inside your shoe, it doesn't matter how comfortable the shoes are, they're now uncomfortable. And one bad client is like that little rock inside your really comfortable walking shoes. Is the prospect ethical? Your business, your rules. As I said, if you're a raging vegan, you don't have to work with meat eaters if they're going to piss you off. Number 2, will you enjoy doing the work with this prospect? Sometimes you get asked to do work that you now deem to be below you. Sometimes you get asked to do incredibly mundane things. Sometimes you get asked to do incredibly low value projects. You've got every right to say no, and I encourage you to do so. Small grunt work that usually this stuff takes away time from winning and working on the big deal. So if you don't think you're going to enjoy doing the work, start making a habit saying no to those particular projects that come your way. And then lastly, does the work conflict with your rules, values, boundaries, long-term vision? You shouldn't be taking on any work that fundamentally conflicts with who you are, because you're going to end up resenting sales, you're going to end up resenting taking on clients. That's not conducive for building a consistent sales pipeline. Worse, if you've been burned before, so you've set up a boundary or a value saying, right, I'm never going to work with that sort of person again, and then a whiff of money comes along and all of a sudden you're like, it'll be different this time. Stop. Don't kid yourself. They're going to be a cunt again. Don't let yourself get burned twice. Don't be that person that keeps going back to their ex, even though every time they go back it ends in breaking up and cheating on each other and whatnot. And then Arguably the most destructive one, taking on work that takes you off your long-term vision. It gives you short-term money, but you're essentially borrowing that money from tomorrow to have it today. If you think that you're on a long, windy road, taking on work that conflicts with your long-term vision essentially sends you off down a little cul-de-sac. And you get the end of it and you collect a little bag of money, but then you've got to turn back around, head down back to the main path and carry on walking. Now you've missed out on a big chunk of time that could have been spent walking the main path, and instead you tried to take a little shortcut down a cul-de-sac. Sometimes it's necessary, I do understand that, but don't let clients pull you around or where you expect to take your business. Can and will they pay? 3 hidden questions here are: do they have the money? Pretty self-explanatory. Do they have the authority to spend this money? Think of all the fucking middle managers or children that you spoke to spending their parents' money. And then what is their attitude to money? So up first, do they have the money? Pretty self-explanatory. You're a business, you're not a charity. You got to make sure that they have the right size budget to engage you for your products and services. 2, do they have authority to spend the money? If I had a quid for every time a middle manager from a large multi-billion pound company came to us and said, hey, I've got 50 guys under my tutelage, under my wing, we need some sales training. I work for this company, which is a big company. What do you say? Just for it to go absolutely nowhere, I'd be a very, very rich man. Middle managers are by far and away the worst for this. And I think this is actually where most people waste a lot of their time, because they don't figure out if they have the authority to spend the money early enough. And then lastly is, what is their attitude towards money, which might sound like a weird one, but some people are incredibly uptight around it. If they're uptight talking about it, they're probably going to be bad at paying at the end because they overvalue it. It sounds silly, but if you've been in business long enough, you'll understand what I mean. If they're unwilling to spend it as well, because they could have the money, they could have the authority to spend it, but they're unwilling to spend it, and they're only interested in how much it costs and have weird, wanky payment terms, such as payment on handover rather than completion. Stand your ground, don't bend to their will. Sometimes you can win them round to your way of thinking, your pricing terms, but if they've got a really weird attitude to money, it's probably going to be a no. And they tend to pay late. They tend to pay really late, if at all. So we've got to fuck those people off pretty early. So those are the 3 triage questions. Can we help them? Do you want to help them? And can and will they pay? How do you get these answers? Because we're not asking them directly. You get them through, oddly enough, asking questions and your intuition. As I said, usually inbound leads, and if you manage to engage a prospect, engage a lead from outbound prospecting, it's because they got a problem they're looking to solve, and they're more than happy to talk about their problems. It's why people love going to fucking therapy, because they get to sit there and talk about all of their problems for the whole bloody time. So that will come up pretty early. Do they have a problem we can solve? And can we help them? That comes up pretty quick. You should know what you're capable of. And you're an expert in your field, so you should know if their problems actually have a solution. Do you want to help them? Does come from your gut. It comes from intuition. It comes from having a bit of a chit chat. There's Dean Jackson's 5-star prospect model. And the biggest one from that fits this is if they're willing to have a conversation and they're open and honest. If they're open and honest and willing to have a conversation, you probably do want to help them, as long as it doesn't conflict with your values, your boundaries, your long-term vision. You can usually figure it out pretty quickly. The most difficult one, the one that people struggle with, is can and will they pay? Now, this is where you need to really behave as if you're a curious child. People don't want to tell salespeople their budget. They feel like it's the ace in the pack that they hold, so they want to keep it secret. If you come across as too slick or professional, they're just not going to trust you. And they're not going to trust you with you knowing exactly how much they're looking or willing or wanting to spend on this thing. So lose the polish and behave as if you're a curious child. You don't want to be polished, slick, and make it feel like you're a lawyer conducting a cross-examination. And keep the questions on them. As I said many times, we have a rule in triage. We don't answer their questions, ever. And if you're asking how do we get around that, we literally say, we'll be happy to answer that, but first, do you mind telling me a little bit more about this? I understand exactly why you want to know that, but before we go into detail about that, why don't you tell me about this thing over here? We're constantly just redirecting them. And if you sat there thinking that doesn't work, it does work. I do hundreds of these triage calls, hundreds. So keep the questions on them. This is not a place for you to flex how intelligent you are, start flaunting your skills or your solution. It's their problem. All they're trying to do at the moment is chuck that problem onto someone else. You want to be playing a game of hot potato, like, oh, God, yeah, see, your problem is fucking yours. Make them feel the weight of it. So getting the answers to the money, you got to behave as a curious child. You got to keep the questions on them. And you can ask roundabout questions such as, how far have you got with this? That's very surface level. Sometimes they say, we've established a budget, or I've already spent X amount trying to fix it here, which gives you a good idea. You can then push them away. If they're being really coy, because some people really are secretive about their budget, you can say, I'm getting the feeling that this isn't urgent, or it's not important today. They'll go, no, it really is. And then you can push and prod and poke a little bit further, and eventually you'll get round to the money. And if they're being particularly difficult, you can ask them, what sort of budget do you think it will take? And the wording there is really important. Do you think it will take? It's reminding them it's their problem. And they'll often say, oh, I don't know, I was thinking around this. And they'll go, what do you think? And that's when you go, oh, if I was to say, I think it'd be at least double that, what would you say? Do you see how I didn't answer their question, but I just gave them another question to answer? And now we're moving forward that money conversation. It's very slick. It's very clever. Anyway, that's the end of this video. Go away, implement triage at the start of the sales process, and let me know how it goes. If you enjoyed this video, then give us a like, subscribe, and most importantly, go buy the book in the description below. At least click the page. There's 8 unbelievable free gifts that go with it. There's a whole community alongside it. It's rather crazy for like a tenner, I think it's going for. Anyway, keep in mind, triage isn't consultation. It's for them to feel the weight of their problems and start qualifying harder. I'll see you in a bit. Bye-bye.